Preface. Students writing research papers, theses, and dissertations in today's colleges and universities inhabit a world filled with electronic technologies that were unimagined in 1937, the year dissertation secretary Cato Turabian first assembled a booklet of guidelines for student writers at the University of Chicago. The availability of word processing software and new digital sources has changed the way students conduct research and write up the results, but these technologies have not altered the basic task of the student writer, doing well-designed research and presenting it clearly and accurately, while following accepted academic standards for citation, style, and format. Turabian's 1937 booklet reflected guidelines found in A Manual of Style, 10th edition, an already classic resource for writers and editors published by the University of Chicago Press. The press began distributing Turabian's booklet in 1947 and first published the work in book form in 1955, under the title A Manual for Writers of Term Papers, Theses, and Dissertations. Turabian revised the work twice more, updating it to meet students' needs and to reflect the latest recommendations of the Manual of Style. Over time, Turabian's book has become a standard reference for students of all levels at universities and colleges across the country. Turabian died in 1987 at age 94, a few months after publication of the 5th edition. For that edition, as well as the 6th and 7th, members of the press editorial staff carried out the revisions. For the 7th edition, Wayne C. Booth, Gregory G. Colomb, and Joseph M. Williams expanded the focus of the book by adding extensive new material adapted from their book The Craft of Research, now in its 3rd edition. Among the new topics covered were the nature of research, finding and engaging sources, taking notes, developing an argument, drafting and revising, and presenting evidence in tables and figures. For this new 8th edition, Part I offers updated coverage on finding and using the many types of digital sources that have become available in recent years. Part 2 offers a comprehensive guide to the 2 Chicago styles of source citation, the notes bibliography format used widely in the humanities and most social sciences, and the author date format favored in many of the sciences and some social sciences. In addition to making the 2 citation systems more consistent stylistically, this edition offers many examples for citing new types of digital sources not previously covered. Part 3 addresses matters of spelling, punctuation, abbreviation, and treatment of numbers, names, special terms, and titles of works. The final 2 chapters in this section treat the mechanics of using quotations and graphics, topics that are discussed from a rhetorical perspective in Part 1. Both Parts 2 and 3 have been updated for this edition in accordance with the 16th edition of the Chicago Manual of Style, or CMOS. The recommendations in this manual in some instances diverge from CMOS in small ways, to better suit the requirements of academic papers as opposed to published works. The appendix presents guidelines for paper format and submission that have become the primary authority for dissertation offices throughout the United States. As revised, these guidelines now reflect the increasing trend toward electronic submission of papers. This appendix is intended primarily for students writing PhD dissertations and master's and undergraduate theses, but the sections on format requirements and electronic file preparation will also aid those writing class papers. An extensive bibliography, organized by subject area, lists current sources for research and style issues specific to various disciplines. The guidelines in this manual offer practical solutions to a wide range of issues encountered by student writers, but they may be supplemented, or even overruled, by the conventions of specific disciplines or the preferences of particular institutions or departments. All of the chapters on style and format remind students to review the requirements of their university, department, or instructor, which take precedence over the guidelines presented here. Updating a book that has been used by millions of students over 75 years is no small task, and many people participated in preparing the 8th edition. Greg Colomb initiated the revision, and his death during the latter stages of the effort was a great loss. Over the years, many press staff members came to know Greg well and to treasure their relationship with him. He will be missed. Greg was the remaining member of the remarkable trio of authors that also included Wayne Booth and Joe Williams. Although they are gone from us, their work will continue to carry the firm, encouraging guidance that has been the hallmark of Turabian's manual. The one voice that they so artfully melded out of their three will always animate this work. John Dorico, Greg's longtime friend and colleague at the University of Virginia, completed the work on Part I that Greg had begun for this edition. Russell David Harper, the principal reviser of the 16th edition of the Chicago Manual of Style, produced the initial drafts of the remaining manuscript. Within the press, the project was developed, in part and in whole, under the guidance of Ginny Gavax, Mary E. Lohr, David Morrow, and Paul Schellinger. The appendix benefited from the generous advice of experts from a range of colleges, universities, and institutions: Matthew Boots of Indiana University, Jenny Borst of the University of Colorado, Boulder, Philippa Carter of the University of Pittsburgh, Melissa Gamise of the University of Michigan, Peggy Harrell of the University of Southern Indiana, Elaine Ishu of the University of Wisconsin, Madison, Jarrett Lement of the University of California, Berkeley, Gail McMillan of the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, Austin McLean of ProQuest Toomey, Colleen Malarkey of the University of Chicago, Bob Penman of the University of Texas at Austin, Laura Ryman of James Madison University, Tim Watson of the Ohio State University, and Mark Zulauf of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. A team of librarians from the Regenstein Library at the University of Chicago provided guidance for the extensive bibliography. Scott Landvatter, Catherine Murdykes, Nancy Spiegel, Sarah G. Wenzel, and Christopher Winters. Turning the manuscript into a book required the efforts of another team at the press. Ruth Goring edited the manuscript, Rosina Bussey proofread the pages, and Mary E. Lohr prepared the index. Michael Bram provided the design, while David O'Connor supervised the production. Liz Fisher, Ellen Gibson, and Carol Casper brought the final product to market. The University of Chicago Press editorial staff, Part I research and writing, from planning to production, Wayne C. Booth, Gregory G. Colomb, and Joseph M. Williams. Overview of Part 1. We know how challenged you can feel when you start a substantial research project, whether it's a PhD dissertation, a BA or master's thesis, or just a long class paper. But you can handle any project if you break it into its parts, then work on them one step at a time. This part shows you how to do that. We first discuss the aims of research and what readers will expect of any research report. Then we focus on how to find a research question whose answer is worth your time and your reader's attention, how to find and use information from sources to back up your answer, and then how to plan, draft, and revise your report so your readers will see that your answer is based on sound reasoning and reliable evidence. Several themes run through this part. You can't plunge into a project blindly, you must plan it, then keep the whole process in mind as you take each step. So think big, but break the process down into small goals that you can meet one at a time. Your best research will begin with a question that you want to answer. But you must then imagine readers asking a question of their own. So what if you don't answer it? Why should I care? From the outset, you should try to write every day, not just to take notes on your sources but to clarify what you think of them. You should also write down your own developing ideas to get them out of the cozy warmth of your head into the cold light of day, where you can see if they still make sense. You probably won't use much of this writing in your final draft, but it is essential preparation for it. No matter how carefully you do your research, readers will judge it by how well you report it, so you must know what they will look for in a clearly written report that earns their respect. If you're an advanced researcher, skim chapters 1, for you will see there much that's familiar, but if you're also teaching, it may help you explain what you know to your students more effectively. Many experienced researchers report that chapters 5, 12 have helped them, not only to explain to others how to conduct research and report it, but also to draft and revise their own reports more quickly and effectively. If you're just starting your career in research, you'll find every chapter of Part 1 useful. Skim it all for an overview of the process, then as you work through your project, reread chapters relevant to your immediate task. You may feel that the steps described here are too many to remember, but you can manage them if you take them one at a time, and as you do more research, they'll become habits of mind. Don't think, however, that you must follow these steps in exactly the order we present them. Researchers regularly think ahead to future steps as they work through earlier ones and revisit earlier steps as they deal with a later one. And even the most systematic researcher has unexpected insights that send her off in a new direction. Work from a plan, but be ready to depart from it, even to discard it for a new one. If you're a very new researcher, you may also think that some matters we discuss are beyond your immediate needs. We know that a 10-page class paper differs from a PhD dissertation, but both require a kind of thinking that even the newest researcher can start practicing. You begin your journey toward full competence when you not only know what lies ahead but can also start practicing the skills that experienced researchers began to learn when they were where you are now. No book can prepare you for every aspect of every research project. And this one won't help you with the specific methodologies in fields such as psychology, economics, and philosophy, much less physics, chemistry, and biology. Nor does it tell you how to adapt what you learn about academic research to business or professional settings. But it does provide an overview of the processes and habits of mind that underlie all research, wherever it's done, and of the plans you must make to assemble a report, draft it, and revise it. With that knowledge and help from your teachers, you'll come to feel in control of your projects, not intimidated by them, and eventually you'll learn to manage even the most complex projects on your own, in both the academic and the professional worlds. The first step in learning the skills of sound research is to understand how experienced researchers think about its aims. 1. What research is and how researchers think about it. 1.1 How researchers think about their aims. 1.2 Three kinds of questions that researchers ask. 1.2.1 Conceptual questions. What should we think? 1.2.2 Practical questions. What should we do? 1.2.3 Applied questions. What must we understand before we know what to do? 1.2.4 Choosing the right kind of question. 1.2.5 The special challenge of conceptual questions. Answering so what? You do research every time you ask a question and look for facts to answer it, whether the question is as simple as finding a plumber or as profound as discovering the origin of life. When only you care about the answer or when others need just a quick report of it, you probably won't write it out, but you must report your research in writing when others will accept your claims only after they study how you reach them. In fact, reports of research tell us most of what we can reliably believe about our world, that once there were dinosaurs, that germs cause disease, even that the earth is round. You may think your report will add little to the world's knowledge. Maybe so. But done well, it will add a lot to yours and to your ability to do the next report. You may also think that your future lies not in scholarly research but in business or profession. But research is as important outside the academy as in, and in most ways it is the same. So as you practice the craft of academic research now, you prepare yourself to do research that one day will be important at least to those you work with, perhaps to us all. As you learn to do your own research, you also learn to use, and judge, that of others. In every profession, researchers must read and evaluate reports before they make a decision, a job you'll do better only after you've learned how others will judge yours. This book focuses on research in the academic world, but every day we read or hear about research that can affect our lives. Before we believe those reports, though, we must think about them critically to determine whether they are based on evidence and reasoning that we can trust. To be sure, we can reach good conclusions in ways other than through reasons and evidence. We can rely on tradition and authority or on intuition, spiritual insight, even on our most visceral emotions. But when we try to explain to others not just why we believe our claims but why they should too, we must do more than just state an opinion and describe our feelings. That is how research report differs from other kinds of persuasive writing. It must rest on shared facts that readers accept as truths independent of your feelings and beliefs. They must be able to follow your reasoning from evidence that they accept to the claim you draw from it. Your success as a researcher thus depends not just on how well you gather and analyze data but on how clearly you report your reasoning so that your readers can test and judge it before making your claims part of their knowledge and understanding. 1.1 How researchers think about their aims. All researchers gather facts and information, what we're calling data. But depending on their aims and experience, they use those data in different ways. Some researchers gather data on a topic, stories about the Battle of the Alamo, for example, just to satisfy a personal interest. Most researchers, however, want us to know more than just facts. So they don't look for just any data on a topic, they look for specific data that they can use as evidence to test and support an answer to a question that their topic inspired them to ask, such as why has the Alamo story become a national legend? Experienced researchers, however, know that they must do more than convince us that their answer is sound. They must also show us why their question was worth asking, how its answer helps us understand some bigger issue in a new way. If we can figure out why the Alamo story has become a national legend, we might then answer a larger question: how have regional myths shaped our national character? You can judge how closely your thinking tracks that of an experienced researcher by describing your project in a sentence like this. 1. I am working on the topic X2. Because I want to find out why 3. So that I can help others understand Z. That sentence is worth a close look, because it describes not just the progress of your research but your personal growth as a researcher. 1. I am working on the topic. Researchers often begin with a simple topic like the Battle of the Alamo, perhaps because it was assigned, because something about it puzzles them, or because it merely sparks an interest. But inexperienced researchers too often stop there, leaving themselves with nothing but a topic to guide their work. They mound up hundreds of notes but have no way to decide what data to keep and what to discard. When it comes time to write, they dump everything into a report that reads like a grab bag of random facts. If those facts are new to readers who happen to be interested in the topic, they might read the report. But even those readers will want to know what those facts add up to. 2. Because I want to find out how or why. More experienced researchers usually begin not with just a topic but with a research question, such as why has the story of the Alamo become a national legend? And they know that readers will think their facts add up to something only when those facts serve as evidence to support its answer. Indeed, only with a question can a researcher know which facts to look for and which to keep, not just those that support an answer but also those that test or even discredit it. When he thinks he has enough evidence to support his answer and can respond to data that seem to contradict it, he writes a report first to test his own thinking, then to share his answer with others so that they can test it too. 3. So that I can help others understand. The most successful researchers, however, realize that readers want to know not only that an answer is sound but why the question was worth asking. So they anticipate that readers will ask a question of their own: so what? Why should I care why the Alamo story has become a legend? That so what? Convicts even the most experienced researcher, but every researcher must try to answer it before it's asked. If we can find that out, we might better understand the bigger question of how such stories shape our national character. But a shrewd researcher doesn't stop there. She anticipates her readers asking so what? Again by looking for another, still larger answer, and if we can understand what has shaped our national character, we might understand better who we Americans think we are. And before you ask, when we know that, we might better understand why others in the world judge us as they do. The most successful researchers know that readers care about a question only when they think that its answer might encourage them to say not so what? But that's worth knowing. In short, not all questions are equally good. We might ask how many cats slept in the Alamo the night before the battle, but so what if we find out? It is hard to see how an answer would help us think about any larger issue worth understanding, so it's a question that's probably not worth asking. 1.23 Kinds of questions that researchers ask. Experienced researchers also know that different readers expect them to ask and answer different kinds of questions. The most common questions in academic work are conceptual. The ones most common in the professions are practical. 1.2.1 Conceptual questions. What should we think? A question is conceptual when your answer to so what? Doesn't tell readers what to do but helps them understand some issue. 1. I am working on the topic X. 2. Because I want to find out how I weather Y. 3. So that I can help others understand how Y weather Z. If you were explaining your research, the conversation might go like this: I'm working on the topic of risk evaluation. Why? Because I want to find out how ordinary people evaluate the risk that they will be hurt by terrorism. So what if you do? Once I do, we might better understand the bigger question of how emotional and rational factors interact to influence the way ordinary thinkers think about risk. Researchers in the humanities and the social and natural sciences work mostly on conceptual questions, such as how did Shakespeare's political environment influence his plays? What caused the extinction of most large North American mammals? What are comets made of? The answers to those questions don't tell us how to change the world, but they do help us understand it better. To be sure, the answer to a conceptual question often turns out to be unexpectedly relevant to solving a practical problem. And before we can solve any important practical problem, we usually must do conceptual research to understand it better. But in most of the academic world, the primary aim of most researchers is only to improve our understanding. 1.2.2 Practical questions. What should we do? You pose a different kind of question, call it a practical one, when your answer to "so what" tells readers what to do to change or fix some troublesome or at least improvable situation. 1. I am working on the topic X. 2. Because I want to find out why. 3. So that I can tell readers what to do to fix improve Z. You would explain your work on a practical question like this: I'm working on the topic of communicating risk effectively. Why? Because I want to find out what psychological factors cause ordinary Americans to exaggerate their personal risk from a terrorist attack. So what if you do? Then I can tell the government how to counteract those factors when they communicate with the public about the real risk of terrorism. Practical questions are most common outside the academic world, especially in business. In academic fields such as healthcare and engineering, researchers sometimes ask practical questions, but more often they ask a third kind of question that's neither purely practical nor purely conceptual. Call it an applied research question. 1.2.3 Applied questions. What must we understand before we know what to do? Often we know we must do something to solve a practical problem, but before we can know what that is, we must do research to understand the problem better. We can call that kind of research applied. With this middle kind of question, the third step raises a question whose answer is not the solution to a practical problem but only a step toward it. I want to find out how Americans have changed their daily lives in response to the terrorist attacks on 9/11. So what if you do? Then we can understand the psychological factors that cause ordinary Americans to exaggerate their personal risk from a terrorist attack. So what if you do? Then we can understand how to reduce the effects of those psychological factors. So what if you do? Then perhaps the government can use that information to communicate more effectively the real risk from terrorism. Applied questions are common in academic fields such as business, engineering, and medicine, and in companies and government agencies that do research to understand what must be known before they can solve a problem. 1.2.4 Choosing the right kind of question. Some new researchers dislike purely conceptual research questions because they think they're too theoretical or irrelevant to the real world. So they try to cobble an implausible practical use onto a conceptual answer. When we know how race shaped the political impact of the Alamo stories, we can understand how racism has been used to foster patriotism and thereby eliminate racist appeals to patriotism in relation to conflicts in the Middle East. That impulse is understandable. But unless you've been assigned an applied or practical problem, resist it. You are unlikely to solve any significant practical problem in a class paper, and in any case, most of the academic world sees its mission not as fixing the problems of the world directly but as understanding them better. 1.2.5 The special challenge of conceptual questions, answering so what? With most practical questions, we don't have to answer so what? Because the benefit is usually obvious. Even most applied questions imply the practical benefits of their answers. Few readers would question why a researcher is trying to understand what causes Alzheimer's. With conceptual questions, however, the answer to so what? Is often not obvious at all, even to an experienced researcher. So what if Shakespeare had Lady Macbeth die off stage rather than on? So what if some cultures use masks in their religious rituals and others don't? Why is it important to know that? For a research paper in an introductory course, your instructor may be satisfied with any plausible answer to so what? So if early in your research career you find yourself struggling with that question, don't take it as a sign of failure, much less as evidence that you're not ready to do the work. In fact, you might not discover the answer to so what? Until you've drafted your report, maybe not even until you've finished it. And even then, maybe the answer will matter only to you. But if your project is a thesis or dissertation, it's not just an advisor that you have to satisfy. Your answer must also satisfy those in your field, who will judge your work not just by the quality of your answer but by the significance of your question. Experienced researchers know that some readers, perhaps many, will read the report and think, "I don't agree." They accept that as an inevitable part of sharing research on significant issues. What they can't accept is "I don't care." So as hard as it will be, the more often you imagine others asking "so what?" and the more often you try to answer it, if only to your own satisfaction, the more confident you can be that eventually you'll learn to succeed at every experienced researcher's toughest task, to convince your readers that your report is worth their time. 2. Moving from a topic to a question to a working hypothesis. 2.1 Find a question in your topic. 2.1.1 Search your interests. 2.1.2 Make your topic manageable. 2.1.3 Question your topic. 2.1.4 Evaluate your questions. 2.2 Propose some working answers. 2.2.1 Decide on a working hypothesis. 2.2.2 Beware the risks in a working hypothesis. 2.2.3 If you can't find an answer, argue for your question. 2.3 Build a storyboard to plan and guide your work. 2.3.1 State your question and working hypotheses. 2.3.2 State your reasons. 2.3.3 Sketch in the kind of evidence you should look for. 2.3.4 Look at the whole. 2.4 Organize a writing support group. A research project is more than collecting data. You start it before you log onto the internet or head for the library, and you continue it long after you have all the data you think you need. In that process, you face countless specific tasks, but they all aim at just 5 general goals. You must do the following. Ask a question worth answering. Find an answer that you can support with good reasons. Find reliable evidence to support your reasons. Draft a report that makes a good case for your answer. Revise that draft until readers will think you met the first 4 goals. You might even post those 5 goals in your workspace. Research projects would be easy if you could march straight through those steps. But as you've discovered, research and its reporting are never straightforward. As you do one task, you'll have to look ahead to others or revisit an earlier one. You'll change topics as you read, search for more data as you draft, perhaps even discover a new question as you revise. Research is looping, messy, and unpredictable. But it's manageable if you have a plan, even when you know you'll depart from it. 2.1 Find a question in your topic. Researchers begin projects in different ways. Many experienced ones begin with a question that others in their field want to answer: what caused the extinction of most large North American mammals? Others begin with just a vague intellectual itch that they have to scratch. They might not know what puzzles them about giant sloths and mastodons, but they're willing to spend time finding out whether they can translate their itch into a question worth answering. They know, moreover, that the best research question is not one whose answer others want to know just for its own sake, it is one that helps them understand some larger issue. For example, if we knew why North American sloths disappeared, we might be able to answer a larger question that puzzles many historical anthropologists. Did early Native Americans live in harmony with nature, as some believe, or did they hunt its largest creatures to extinction? Then there are those questions that just pop into a researcher's mind with no hint of where they'll lead, sometimes about matters so seemingly trivial that only the researcher thinks they're worth answering. Why does a coffee spill dry up in the form of a ring? Such a question might lead nowhere, but you can't know that until you see its answer. In fact, the scientist puzzled by coffee rings made discoveries about the behavior of fluids that others in his field thought important, and that paint manufacturers found valuable. So who knows where you might go with a question like how many cats slept in the Alamo the night before the battle? You can't know until you get there. In fact, a researcher's most valuable ability is the knack of being puzzled by ordinary things, like the shape of coffee rings, or why Shakespeare has Lady Macbeth die off stage rather than on, or why your eyebrows don't grow as long as the hair on your head. Cultivate the ability to see what's odd in the commonplace and you'll never lack for research projects, as either a student or a professional. If you have a topic, skip to 2.1.3 to find questions in it. If you already have a question or two, skip to 2.1.4 to test them by the criteria listed there. If you're still looking for a topic, here's a plan to help you search for one. 2.1.1 Search your interests. If you can pick any topic appropriate to your field, ask these questions. What topics do you already know something about? You can learn more. What would you like to know more about? A place? A person? A time? An object? An idea? A process? Can you find a discussion list on the internet about issues that interest you? Have you taken positions on any issues in your field in debates with others but found that you couldn't back up your views with good reasons and evidence? What issues do people outside your field misunderstand? What topic is your instructor working on? Would she like you to explore a part of it? Don't be too shy to ask. Does your library have rich resources in some field? Ask your instructor or librarian, what other courses will you take in your field or out of it? Find a textbook and skim it for study questions. If you have a job in mind, what kind of research report might help you get it? Employers often ask for samples of an applicant's work. You can also consult print sources for ideas. Skim the topics in specialized indexes in your field such as Philosopher's Index, Geographical Abstracts, Women's Studies Abstracts, and so on. Skim a journal that reviews the year's work in your field. Academic research is meant to be shared, but the understanding it brings may also be valuable to you in the future. So think ahead, look for a project that might help you a year from now. Keep in mind, though, that you may be in for a long relationship with your topic, so be sure it interests you enough to get you through the inevitable rocky stretches. 2.1.2 Make your topic manageable. If you pick a topic whose name sounds like an encyclopedia entry, bridges, birds, masks, you'll find so many sources that you could spend a lifetime reading them. You must carve out of your topic a manageable piece. You can start before you head to the library by limiting your topic to reflect a special interest in it. What is it about, say, masks that made you choose them? What particular aspect of them interests or puzzles you? Think about your topic in a context that you know something about, then add words and phrases to reflect that knowledge. Masks in religious ceremonies. Masks as symbols in Hopi religious ceremonies. Mudhead masks as symbols of sky spirits in Hopi fertility ceremonies. You might not be able to focus your topic until after you start reading about it. That takes time, so start early. Begin with an overview of your topic in a general encyclopedia, then read about it in a specialized one. Skim a survey of your topic. Skim subheads under your topic in an annual bibliography in your field. That will also give you a start on a reading list. Search the internet for the topic. Especially useful are topics that spark debate. Fisher claims that Halloween masks reveal children's archetypal fears, but do they? Even if you can't resolve the debate, you can learn how such debates are conducted. 2.1.3 Question your topic. Do this not just once, early on, but throughout your project. Ask questions as you read, especially how and why. Try the following kinds of questions. 1. Ask how the topic fits into a larger context. How does your topic fit into a larger story? What came before masks? How did masks come into being? Why? What changes have they caused in other parts of their social or geographic setting? How and why did that happen? Why have masks become a part of Halloween? How and why have masks helped make Halloween the biggest American holiday after Christmas? How is our topic a functioning part of a larger system? How do masks reflect the values of specific societies and cultures? What roles do masks play in Hopi dances? In scary movies? In masquerade parties? For what purposes are masks used other than disguise? How has the booming market for kachina masks influenced traditional designs? How does your topic compare to and contrast with other topics like it? How do masks in Native American ceremonies differ from those in Africa? What do Halloween masks have to do with Mardi Gras masks? How are masks and cosmetic surgery alike? 2. Ask questions about the nature of the thing itself, as an independent entity. How has your topic changed through time? Why? What is its future? How have Halloween masks changed? Why? How have Native American masks changed? Why? How do the parts of your topic fit together as a system? What parts of a mask are most significant in Hopi ceremonies? Why? Why do some masks cover only the eyes? Why do so few masks cover just the bottom half of the face? How many different categories of your topic are there? What are the different kinds of Halloween masks? What are the different qualities of moss, KS? What are the different functions of Halloween masks? 3. Turn positive questions into a negative ones. Why have masks not become a part of Christmas? How do Native American masks not differ from those in Africa? What parts of masks are typically not significant in religious ceremonies? 4. Ask speculative questions. Why are masks common in African religions but not in Western ones? Why are children more comfortable wearing Halloween masks than are most adults? Why don't hunters in camouflage wear masks? 5. Ask what if questions. How would things be different if your topic never existed, disappeared, or were put into a new context? What if no one ever wore masks except for safety reasons? What if everyone wore masks in public? What if movies and TV were like Greek plays and all the actors wore masks? What if it were customary to wear masks on blind dates? In marriage ceremonies? At funerals? 6. Ask questions that reflect disagreements with a source. If a source makes a claim you think is weakly supported or even wrong, make that disagreement a question. Martinez claims that carnival masks uniquely allow wearers to escape social norms. But I think religious masks also allow wearers to escape from the material realm to the spiritual. Is there a larger pattern of all masks creating a sense of alternative forms of social or spiritual life? 7. Ask questions that build on agreement. If a source offers a claim you think is persuasive, ask questions that extend its reach. Elias shows that masked balls became popular in 18th century London in response to anxiety about social mobility. Is the same anxiety responsible for similar developments in other European capitals? You can also ask a question that supports the same claim with additional evidence. Elias supports his claim about masked balls entirely with published sources. Is it also supported by evidence from unpublished sources such as letters and diaries? 8. Ask questions analogous to those that others have asked about similar topics. Smith analyzed the Battle of Gettysburg from an economic point of view. What would an economic analysis of the Battle of the Alamo turn up? 9. Look for questions that other researchers pose but don't answer. Many journal articles end with a paragraph or two about open questions, ideas for more research, and so on. You might not be able to do all the research they suggest, but you might carve out a piece of it. 10. Find an internet discussion list on your topic, then lurk, just reading the exchanges to understand the kinds of questions those on the list discuss. If you can't find a list using a search engine, ask a teacher or visit the website of professional organizations in your field. Look for questions that spark your interest. You can even ask a question of the list, so long as it is very specific and narrowly focused, but wait until you see whether questions from students are welcomed. 2.1.4 Evaluate your questions. Not all answers are equally useful, so evaluate your questions and scrap those that are unlikely to yield interesting answers. Reconsider when the following is true. 1. You can answer the question too easily. You can look it up. What masks are used in Navajo dances? You can summarize a source. What does Fisher say about masks and fears? 2. You can't find good evidence to support the answer. No relevant facts exist. Are Mayan masks modeled on space aliens? The question is based on preference or taste. Are Balinese or Mayan masks more beautiful? You must read too many sources. How are masks made? You don't want to plow through countless reports to find the best evidence. You can't get the sources that your readers think are crucial. In even moderately advanced projects, you'll be expected to work with the best sources available. For a thesis and dissertation, they're essential. If you can't obtain those sources, find another question. 3. You can't plausibly disprove the answer. The answer seems self-evident because the evidence overwhelmingly favors one answer. How important are masks in Inuit culture? The answer is obvious, very. If you can't imagine disproving a claim, then proving it is pointless. Don't reject a question because you think someone must already have asked it. Until you know, pursue its answer as if you asked first. Even if someone has answered it, you might come up with a better answer or at least one with a new slant. In fact, in the humanities and social sciences, the best questions usually have more than one good answer. You can also organize your project around comparing and contrasting competing answers and supporting the best one. The point is to find a question that you want to answer. Too many students, both graduate and undergraduate, think that the aim of education is to memorize settled answers to someone else's questions. It is not. It is to learn to find your own answers to your own questions. To do that, you must learn to wonder about things, to let them puzzle you, particularly things that seem most commonplace. 2.2 Propose some working answers. Before you get deep into your project, try one more step. It is one that some beginners resist but that experienced researchers usually attempt. Once you have a question, imagine some plausible answers, no matter how sketchy or speculative. At this stage, don't worry whether they're right. That comes later. For example, suppose you ask, why do some religions use masks in ceremonies while others don't? You might speculate. Maybe cultures with many spirits need masks to distinguish them. Maybe masks are common in cultures that mix religion and medicine. Maybe religions originating in the Middle East were influenced by the Jewish prohibition against idolatry. Even a general answer can suggest something worth studying. Maybe it has to do with the role of masks in non-religious areas of a culture. Try to imagine at least one plausible answer, no matter how tentative or speculative. If after lots of research you can't confirm it, you can organize your report around why that answer seemed reasonable at the time but turned out to be wrong and so isn't worth the time of other researchers. That in itself can be a valuable contribution to the conversation on your topic. In fact, look for 2 or 3 plausible answers. Even if you prefer one, you can improve it by testing it against the others, and in any event, you can't show that an answer is right if you can't also show why others are wrong. Even early in the project, write out your answers as clearly and as fully as you can. It is too easy to think that you have a clear idea when you don't. Putting a foggy idea into words is the best way to clarify it, or to discover that you can't. 2.2.1 Decide on a working hypothesis. If one answer seems promising, call it your working hypothesis and use it to guide your research. You can, of course, look for evidence with no more than a question to guide you, because any question limits the number of plausible answers. But even the most tentative working hypothesis helps you to think ahead, especially about the kind of evidence that you'll need to support it. Will you need numbers? Quotations? Observations? Images? Historical facts? More important, what kind of evidence would disprove your hypothesis? Answer those questions and you know the kind of data to watch for and to keep. In fact, until you have a hypothesis, you can't know whether any data you collect are relevant to any question worth asking. If you can't imagine any working hypothesis, reconsider your question. Review your list of exploratory questions to find one that you can answer. If you skip that step, go back to 2.1.3. You may even decide to start over with a new topic. That costs time in the short run, but it may save you from a failed project. If you're working on a thesis or dissertation, you can wait longer to firm up a hypothesis while you read and ponder, but don't get deeply into your project without at least the glimmer of a possible answer. Under no circumstances should you put off thinking about a hypothesis until you begin drafting your report or, worse, until you've almost finished it. You might not settle on the best answer to your question until you've written your last page. Writing, even revising, is itself an act of discovery. Just don't wait until that last page to start thinking about some answer. 2.2.2 Beware the risks in a working hypothesis. It is a bad idea to settle on a final answer too soon. But many new researchers and some experienced ones are afraid to consider any working hypothesis early in their project, even one they hold lightly, because they fear it might bias their thinking. There is some risk of that, but a working hypothesis need not close your mind to a better one. Even the most objective scientist devises an experiment to test for just a few predicted outcomes, often just one. In fact, researchers who don't state a hypothesis usually have one in mind but don't want to seem publicly committed to it, lest it turn out wrong. A working hypothesis is a risk only if it blinds you to a better one or if you can't give it up when the evidence says you should. So as in all relationships, don't fall too hard for your first hypothesis. The more you like it, the less easily you'll see its flaws. Despite that risk, it's better to start with a flawed hypothesis than with none at all. 2.2.3 If you can't find an answer, argue for your question. We have focused on questions so much that you might think that your project fails if you can't answer yours. In fact, much important research explains why a question no one has asked should be, even though the researcher can't answer it. Do turtles dream? Why is yawning contagious but being sleepy isn't? Or is it? Such reports focus on why the question is important and what a good answer might look like. Or you may find that someone has answered your question, but incompletely or even, if you're lucky, incorrectly. If you can't find the right answer, you help readers by showing that a widely accepted one is wrong. Only when you ask question after question will you develop the critical imagination you'll need in any profession you pursue. In fact, as experienced researchers know, most issues have few, if any, final answers, because there are no final questions. They know that it's as important to ask a new question as it is to answer an old one, and that one day their new question will become old and yield to a newer researcher's still newer one. Your job is to become that newer researcher. 2.3 Build a storyboard to plan and guide your work. For a short paper, you might not need a detailed plan, a sketch of an outline might do. But for a long project, you'll usually need more, especially for one as long as a thesis or dissertation. The first plan that comes to mind is usually an outline, with its I's and choose and A's and B's and so on. If you prefer an outline, use one, especially if your project is relatively short. The problem is that an outline can force you to specify too much too soon and so lock up a final form before you've done your best thinking. To avoid that risk, many researchers, including those outside the academic world, plan long reports on a storyboard. A storyboard is like an outline spread over several pages, with lots of space for adding data and ideas as you go. It is more flexible than an outline. It can help you plan your search for evidence, organize your argument, write a first draft, and test a final one. As opposed to lines in an outline, you can physically move storyboard pages around without having to print a new plan every time you try out a new organization. You can spread its pages across a wall, group related pages, and put minor sections below major ones to create a picture of your project that shows you at a glance the design of the whole and your progress through it. 2.3.1 State your question and working hypotheses. To start a storyboard, state at the top of its first page your question and working hypothesis as exactly as you can, then add plausible alternatives to help you see more clearly its limits and strengths. Add new hypotheses as you think of them, and cross off those you prove wrong. But save them, because you might be able to use one of them in your introduction. 2.3.2 State your reasons. Put at the top of separate pages each reason that might support your best hypothesis, even if you have only one or two. Imagine explaining your project to a friend. You say, I want to show that Alamo stories help develop a unique Texan identity, and your friend asks, why do you think so? Your reasons are the general statements that you offer to support your answer. Well, first, the stories distorted facts to emphasize what became central to Texan identity. Second, the stories were first used to show that Texas was a new kind of frontier. Third, and so on. If you can think of only one or two reasons, put placeholders at the tops of pages. Reason 3, something about Alamo stories making Texans feel special. If you know only how you want a reason to support your answer, state that. Reason 4, something to show that Alamo stories were more than just myth. Each reason, of course, needs support, so for each reason, ask why do I think that? What evidence will I need to prove it? That will help you focus your search for evidence. If you're new to your topic or early in your project, your reasons may be only educated guesses that you'll change. If you don't, you might not be self-critical enough. But a list of reasons, no matter how speculative, is the best framework to guide your research and focus your thinking, and certainly better than no reasons at all. 2.3.3 Sketch in the kind of evidence you should look for. Every field prefers its own kinds of evidence, numbers, quotations, observations, historical facts, images, and so on. So for each reason, sketch the kind of evidence that you think you'll need to support it. Even imagine what the most convincing evidence would look like. If you can't imagine the kind of evidence you'll need, leave that part of the page blank, then read secondary sources to find out the kind of evidence that researchers in your field favor. 2.3.4 Look at the whole. Lay the pages on a table or tape them on a wall. Then step back and look at their order. When you plan a first draft, you must put its parts in some order, so you might as well think about one now. Can you see a logic in your order? Cause and effect? Narrative time? Relative importance? Complexity? Length? Try out different orders. This storyboard isn't your final plan, it's only a tool to guide your thinking and organize what you find. When you fill a page, try drafting that section, because writing out your ideas can improve your thinking at every stage of your project. Someday you may have the leisure to amble through sources, reading just what interests you. Such random browsing has opened up important lines of research. But if your report is due in a month or so, you can't wait for lightning to strike, you need a plan. A storyboard is a simple and reliable device to help you create one. 2.4 Organize a writing support group. A downside of scholarly research is its isolation. Except for group projects, you'll read, think, and write mostly alone, but it doesn't have to be that way, at least not entirely. Look for someone other than your instructor or advisor who will talk with you about your progress, review your drafts, even pester you about how much you have written. That might be a generous friend, but look first for another writer so that you can comment on each other's ideas and drafts. Better yet is a writing group of 4 or 5 people working on their own projects who meet regularly to discuss one another's work. Early on, start each meeting with a summary of each person's project in that 3-part sentence. I'm working on the topic X, because I want to find out Y, so that I can better understand Z. As your projects develop, start with an elevator story, a short summary of your research that you might give someone in the elevator on the way to the meeting. It should include that 3-part sentence, a working hypothesis, and the major reasons supporting it. In later stages, the group shares outlines and drafts so that they can serve as surrogate readers to anticipate how your final readers will respond. If your group has a problem with your draft, so will your final readers. They can even help you brainstorm when you bog down, but for most writers, a writing group is most valuable for the discipline it imposes. It is easier to meet a schedule when you know you must report your progress to others. Writing groups are standard practice for those preparing theses or dissertations, but the rules may differ for a class paper. Some teachers think that a group or writing partner might provide more help than is appropriate, so be clear with your instructor about what your group will do. If you don't, she may decide the assistance you have received is inappropriate. 3. Finding useful sources. 3.1 Understand the kinds of sources readers expect you to use. 3.1.1 Consult primary sources for evidence. 3.1.2 Read secondary sources to learn from other researchers. 3.1.3 Read tertiary sources for introductory overviews. 3.2 Record your sources fully, accurately, and appropriately. 3.2.1 Determine your citation style. 3.2.2 Record bibliographic data. 3.3 Search for sources systematically. 3.3.1 Look for someone who knows something about your topic. 3.3.2 Skim the internet. 3.3.3 Talk to reference librarians. 3.3.4 Browse in your reference area. 3.3.5 Skim a few specialized reference works. 3.3.6 Search your library catalog. 3.3.7 Search guides to periodical literature. 3.3.8 Browse the shelves. 3.3.9 For advanced projects, follow bibliographic trails. 3.4 Evaluate sources for relevance and reliability. 3.4.1 Evaluate the relevance of sources. 3.4.2 Evaluate the reliability of print sources. 3.4.3 Evaluate the reliability of online sources. 3.5 Look beyond the usual kinds of references. Once you have at least a question and perhaps a working hypothesis along with a few tentative reasons for supporting it, you can start looking for the data you'll need to support your reasons and test your hypothesis. In this chapter we explain how to find those data and in the next how to work with them, but don't think of finding sources and reading them as separate steps. Once you have a promising source, read it to find other sources. And as you fill your storyboard with notes, you'll discover gaps and new questions that only more sources can fill. So while we discuss finding and using sources as 2 steps, you'll more often do them repeatedly and simultaneously. 3.1 Understand the kinds of sources readers expect you to use. Depending on your experience, readers will expect you to use different levels of sources, called primary, secondary, and tertiary. These aren't sharply defined categories, but they roughly characterize how researchers think about most sources. 3.1.1 Consult primary sources for evidence. In fields such as literary studies, the arts, and history, primary sources are original works, diaries, letters, manuscripts, images, films, film scripts, recordings, and musical scores created by writers, artists, composers, and so on. Those sources provide data, the words, images, and sounds that you use as evidence to support your reasons. Data can also be objects, coins, clothing, tools, and other artifacts from the period or belonging to a person you're studying. In fields such as economics, psychology, chemistry, and so on, researchers typically collect data through observation and experiment. In others, researchers gather evidence through interviews. In such fields, evidence consists of the data that researchers collect. The primary sources for those collected data are the publications that first publish them, ranging from government and commercial databases to scholarly journals. Experienced researchers look for data in primary sources first. If, for example, you were writing on Alamo stories, you'd try to find sources written at the time, letters, diaries, eyewitness reports, and so on. 3.1.2 Read secondary sources to learn from other researchers. Secondary sources are books and articles that analyze primary sources, usually written by and for other researchers. A report in a scholarly journal analyzing Alamo stories would be a secondary source for researchers working on those stories. Secondary sources also include specialized encyclopedias and dictionaries that offer essays written by scholars in a field. You use secondary sources for three purposes. 1. To keep up with current research. Researchers read secondary sources to keep up with the work of other researchers, to inform and refine their thinking, and to motivate their own work by adding to a published line of research. 2. To find other points of view. A research report is not complete until the researcher acknowledges and responds to the views of others and to his readers' predictable questions and disagreements. You can find most of those other points of view in secondary sources. What alternatives to your ideas do they offer? What evidence do they cite that you must acknowledge? Some new researchers think they weaken their case if they mention any view opposing their own. The truth is the opposite. When you acknowledge competing views, you show readers that you not only know those views but can confidently respond to them. For more on this, see 5.4.3. More important, you must use those competing views to improve your own. You can't understand what you think until you understand why a rational person might think differently. So as you look for sources, don't look just for those that support your views. Be alert as well for those that contradict them. 3. To find models for your own research and analysis. You can use secondary sources to find out not just what others have written about your topic but how they have written about it, as models for the form and style of your own report. Imagine a secondary source as a colleague talking to you about your topic. As you respond, you'd want to sound like someone who knows the field, and so you'd try to learn how she reasons, the language she uses, the kinds of evidence she offers, and the kinds she rarely or never uses. The conversation would be in writing, so you'd even imitate stylistic details such as whether she writes in long paragraphs or breaks up her pages with subheads and bullet points. You can also use a secondary source as a model for your conceptual analysis. If, for example, you were analyzing Alamo stories, you might study how a source treats Custer's last stand. Is its approach psychological, social, historical, political? Its particular reasons or evidence will probably be irrelevant to your project, but you might support your answer with the same kinds of data and reasoning, perhaps even following the same organization. So if you come across a source that's not exactly on your topic but treats one like it, skim it to see how that researcher thinks about his material and presents it. Researchers use data reported in secondary sources only when they can't find them in primary sources. Then they're cautious about using those secondary sources, because second-hand reports of data have a high error rate. If you're doing very advanced work, check the accuracy of important quotations, facts, or numbers from secondary sources. Those who publish in respected places rarely misreport deliberately, but they make careless mistakes more often than non-experts think or experts admit. Of course, if you were studying how the Alamo story has been analyzed, then secondary sources offering those analyses would be your primary sources. If you're new to a field, you may find secondary sources hard to read, they assume a lot of background knowledge, and many aren't clearly written. If you're working on a topic new to you, you might begin with an overview in a specialized encyclopedia or reliable tertiary source. 3.1.3 Read tertiary sources for introductory overviews. Tertiary sources are based on secondary sources, usually written for non-specialists. They include general encyclopedias and dictionaries, as well as newspapers and magazines like Time and The Atlantic Monthly, and commercial books written for a general audience. Well-edited general encyclopedias offer a quick overview of many topics. Beware, however, of online encyclopedias, such as Wikipedia, that rely on anonymous contributions rather than on carefully edited entries written by established researchers. Wikipedia has proved to be relatively accurate in the sciences, but overall it is uneven and sometimes wrong. Never cite it as an authoritative source. Be similarly cautious about using magazine and newspaper articles. Some describe research reported in secondary sources reliably, but most oversimplify or simply misreport it. You would, of course, treat such a source as primary if you were studying how it deals with a topic, such as gender bias in the Encyclopedia Britannica or hoaxes in Wikipedia. Once you understand kinds of sources, you can begin looking for them. 3.2 Record your sources fully, accurately, and appropriately. Before you look for sources, you should know how to cite the ones you find. Your readers will trust your report only if they trust your evidence, and they won't trust your evidence if they can't find your sources. Your first obligation as a researcher is to cite your sources accurately and fully so that your readers can find them. 3.2.1 Determine your citation style. Most fields require a specific citation style. The two most common ones are described in detail in Part 2. Notes bibliography style, used widely in the humanities and in some social sciences. Author date style, used in most social sciences and in the natural sciences. If you are uncertain which style to use, consult your instructor. Before you start compiling your list of sources, read the general introduction to citations in Chapter 15 and then, depending on the citation style you are required to use, read the introduction to bibliography style or author date style. 3.2.2 Record bibliographic data. To save time and avoid errors, record all the citation information you will need when you first find a source. Most of this information appears on the title page of a book or at the head of a journal article. The specific information you need depends on the type of source, but for each source, record at least the following. Who wrote or assembled the source? Author, editor, translator. What data identify the source? Title and subtitle. Title and subtitle of any larger work that contains the source, such as a collection, journal, or newspaper. Page numbers if the source appears in a larger work. Volume number, issue number, edition number. For online sources, URL and date you access the material. Who published the source and when. Publisher's name, place of publication, date of publication. For your own use, you might record Library of Congress call numbers. You won't include them in bibliographic citations, but you may find them helpful if you must consult the source again. At some point, you'll need to format this bibliographic information into your required citation style, so you should record your sources in that style now. You can find templates and examples for bibliography style in Figure 16.1 and Chapter 17. For author date style, refer to Figure 18.1 and Chapter 19. As you record these data, you'll be tempted to take shortcuts, because it's boring work and rules about periods, commas, and parentheses can feel like nitpicking. But nothing labels you a beginner faster than citations that are inappropriate, or worse, incomplete or inaccurate. So get in the habit of recording bibliographic data for a source fully, accurately, and appropriately the moment you handle it. There are computer programs that automatically format citations for you. They are useful aids, but they cannot substitute for your own knowledge of proper citation forms and methods, and not all of the software works perfectly. 3.3 Search for sources systematically. As you search for sources, you must be knowledgeably systematic, because if you miss an important one, you'll lose credibility. 3.3.1 Look for someone who knows something about your topic. You might start by asking around to find someone who knows something about your topic and standard reference works on it. Advanced students, faculty, even people outside the academic community. You might look up your topic in the yellow pages of the phone book. You won't always find someone, but you might get lucky. 3.3.2 Skim the internet. Before college, many students do research only on the internet, because their high school libraries are small, because they need to find only a few sources, and because their teachers aren't particular about the quality of those sources. However, in many fields important and significant research is increasingly either published or archived online, so you can often do useful preliminary work with a scholarly search engine such as Google Scholar. The best of these not only will give you a rough idea of the kinds of sources available but will also identify how many times a particular source has been cited in other books or articles on the topic. Online databases and search engines also frequently tag their results with associated search keywords. At this stage in your research, following these trails of related search terms can help put your research question into contexts that might not otherwise occur to you. But if you search just the internet, you'll miss important sources that you will find only by poking around in your library. If your library catalog is online, you can start there. Once again, you'll work most efficiently if you have a plan. 3.3.3 Talk to reference librarians. If you don't know how to find what you need, ask a librarian. Most college libraries offer tours of reference rooms and special collections as well as short seminars on how to search the catalog, databases, and other sources of information. If you're a new researcher, seize every opportunity to learn online search techniques in your field. You can also talk to librarians who specialize in your area. They won't find sources for you, but they will help you look for them. If you have a research question, share it. I'm looking for data on X because I want to find out. If you have a working hypothesis and reasons, share them too. I'm looking for data to show Y because I want to claim Y or hypothesis. Rehearse your questions to avoid wasting your time and theirs. 3.3.4 Browse in your reference area. Researchers in all fields share common values and habits of thought, but every field has its own ways of doing things. To learn about the ways of your field, browse the shelves in your library's reference room that hold guides to your field's particular research methods, databases, and special resources. At least familiarize yourself with the following resources. A bibliography of works published each year in your field, such as Philosopher's Index or Education Index. Summary bibliographies of works on a specific topic collected over several years. Collections of abstracts that summarize articles in newspapers and in professional journals. Reviews of the year's work. Look for a title in your field beginning with reviews in. For new fields, websites maintained by individuals or scholarly associations. If you know even a little of the secondary literature on your topic, you can begin looking for more substantive sources. If you don't, you might start with some specialized reference works. 3.3.5 Skim a few specialized reference works. Start by looking up your topic in a relevant specialized encyclopedia or dictionary such as the Encyclopedia of Philosophy or the Concise Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms, where you may find an overview of your topic and often a list of standard primary and secondary sources. 3.3.6 Search your library catalog. Subject headings in books. As soon as you find one recent book relevant to your topic, look it up in your library's online catalog to find its Library of Congress subject headings. They will be at the bottom of the entry. For example, the online entry for this book includes these two topics. 1. Dissertations, academic. 2. Academic writing. You can click on the subject headings to find other books on the same topics. Many of those sources will have still more subject headings that can lead you to still more sources. It can turn into an endless trail. Keywords. Also search your online catalog using keywords from your question or working hypothesis. Alamo, Texas Independence, James Bowie. If you find too many titles, start with those published in the last 10 years by well-known university presses. For a wider selection, search WorldCat if your library subscribes. Otherwise, search the Library of Congress catalog as it has links to large university catalogs. Start early if you expect to get books on interlibrary loan articles. If most sources on your topic are articles, locate a recent one in your library's online databases. Its database entry will include a list of keywords. Search for them to find more articles on your topic. In most cases, you can just click on them. Use the keywords to search the library catalog as well. Some databases also provide abstracts of journal articles that you can skim for search terms. 3.3.7 Search Guides to Periodical Literature. If you've done research before, you're probably familiar with annual guides such as Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, which cites sources such as magazines and newspapers. Most specialized fields also have yearly guides to secondary sources, such as art abstracts, historical abstracts, and abstracts in anthropology. Most are available online or in other digital forms. All those resources will direct you to more sources, but none of them can substitute for the kind of in-library search that turns up an unexpectedly useful source. 3.3.8 Browse the shelves. You might think that online research is faster than walking around your library. But it can be slower, and if you work only online you may miss crucial sources that you'd find only in the library. More important, you'll miss the benefits of serendipity, a chance encounter with a source that you find only in person. If you're allowed in the stacks, find the shelf with books on your topic. Then scan the titles on that shelf and the ones above, below, and on either side. Then turn around and skim titles behind you. You never know. When you spot a promising title, especially on a university press book with a new binding, skim its table of contents, then its index for keywords related to your question or its answer. Then skim its bibliography for titles that look relevant to your project. You can do all that faster with books on a shelf than you can online. If the book looks promising, skim its preface or introduction. If it still looks promising, set it aside for a closer look. Even if it doesn't seem relevant, record its Library of Congress call number and bibliographic data, and in a few words summarize what the book seems to be about. A month later, you might realize that it's more useful than you thought. You can check tables of contents for many journals online, but browsing in the journals area of a library can be more productive. Find the journals that have promising articles. Skim tables of contents for the prior 10 years. Most volumes include a yearly summary table of contents. Then take a quick look at the journals shelved nearby. Scan their most recent tables of contents. You will be surprised at how often you find a relevant article that you would have missed had you done your work entirely online. If you are new to a field, you can get a rough impression of the academic quality of a journal by its look. If it's on glossy paper with lots of illustrations, even advertisements, it might be more journalistic than scholarly. Those are not infallible signs of unreliable scholarship, but they are worth considering. 3.3.9 For advanced projects, follow bibliographic trails. If you're into advanced work, use the bibliographies in your sources to find new sources and use their bibliographies in turn to find more. Do this. Skim bibliographies of recent books on your topic, look at any work mentioned in all or most of them, along with other publications by its author. If you find a source useful, skim its index for authors mentioned on 4 or more pages. Look for reviews of research in the first few paragraphs of journal articles. Look for recent PhD dissertations even marginally related to your topic. Almost every dissertation reviews research in its first or second chapter. New sources are best, but you may discover an old one with data long neglected. 3.4 Evaluate sources for relevance and reliability. You will probably find more sources than you can use, so you must evaluate their usefulness by skimming quickly for 2 criteria, relevance and reliability. 3.4.1 Evaluate the relevance of sources. Once you decide a book might be relevant, skim it systematically. If its index lists keywords related to your question or its answers, skim the pages on which those words occur. Skim its introduction, especially its last page, where writers often outline their text. Skim its last chapter, especially the first and last 6 or 7 pages. If you have time, do the same for chapters that look relevant, especially those for which the index lists many of your keywords. If the source is a collection of articles, skim the editor's introduction. Be sure that you're looking at a book's most recent edition. Over time, researchers change their views, refining them, even rejecting earlier ones. If you're doing advanced work, read book reviews of promising sources. If your source is a journal article, do this. Read its abstract, if any. Skim the last 2 or 3 paragraphs of the introduction and all of any section called conclusion. If the article has no separate introduction or conclusion, skim its first and last few paragraphs. Skim the first paragraph or 2 after each subhead, if any. If your source is online, do this. If it looks like a printed article, follow the steps for a journal article. Skim any section labeled Introduction, Overview, Summary, or the like. If there is none, look for a link labeled About the site or something similar. If the site has a link labeled Sitemap or Index, follow it and check the list, looking for keywords related to your question or its answers. Click to skim those pages. If the site has a search function, type in keywords from your topic. 3.4.2 Evaluate the reliability of print sources. You can't judge a source until you read it, but there are signs of its reliability. 1. Is the author a reputable scholar? Most publications cite an author's academic credentials. You can find more with a search engine. Most established scholars are reliable, but be cautious if the topic is a contested social issue such as gun control or abortion. Even reputable scholars can have axes to grind, especially if their research is supported by a special interest group. 2. Is the source current? Many reputable scholars write books and articles popularizing the research of others. But by the time you read these tertiary sources, they may be out of date. How fast a source dates varies by subject, so check with someone who knows your field. For journal articles in the social sciences, more than 10 years is pushing the limit. For books, figure 15 or so. Publications in the humanities have a longer lifespan. 3. Is the source published by a reputable press? You can trust most university presses, especially those at well-known schools. Before they publish a manuscript, they ask experts to review it. You can also trust some commercial presses in some fields, such as Norton in literature, Ablex in sciences, or West in the law. Be skeptical of a commercial book that makes sensational claims, even if its author has a PhD after his name. 4. Was the article peer-reviewed? Most scholarly journals, both print and online, publish only peer-reviewed articles. Few commercial magazines use peer review, and fewer still check an author's facts. If a report hasn't been peer-reviewed, use it cautiously. 5. Has the source received good reviews? If the source is a book published more than a year ago, it may have been reviewed in a journal in the field. Many fields have indexes to published reviews that tell you how others evaluate a source. 6. Has the source been frequently cited by others? You can roughly estimate how influential a source is by how often others cite it. To determine that, consult a citation index. Those signs don't guarantee that a source is reliable, but they should give you reasonable confidence in it. If you can't find reliable sources, acknowledge the limits of the ones you have. Of course, you may find an exciting research problem when you discover that a source thought to be reliable is not. 3.4.3 Evaluate the reliability of online sources. Evaluate online sources as you do those in print, but more cautiously. The number of reliable internet sources grows every day, but they are still islands in a swamp of misinformation. If you find data available only on the internet, look for sites or online publications with these signs of reliability. 1. The site is sponsored by a reputable organization. Some sites supported by individuals are reliable, most are not. 2. It is related to a reliable professional journal. 3. It supplements reliable print sources. Some journals use the internet to host discussions among authors and readers, to offer data too new to be in libraries, to archive data not in articles, or to present illustrations too expensive to print. Many government and academic databases are only online. 4. It avoids heated advocacy for or against a contested social issue. 5. It does not make wild claims, attack other researchers, use abusive language, or make errors of spelling, punctuation, and grammar. 6. It indicates when the site was last updated. If it has no date, be cautious. Trust a site only if scholarly readers would trust those who maintain it. If you don't know who maintains it, be skeptical. Online services now provide reliable editions of many older texts. You'll also find well-edited texts at many university sites. It's one-stop shopping, you never have to move from your chair. Online services are, however, far less complete than most university libraries, and using them will teach you nothing about doing research in a real library. Someday everything ever printed will be available online. But until then, surfing the internet can't completely replace prowling the stacks. 3.5 Look beyond the usual kinds of references. If you are writing a class paper, you'll usually have to focus narrowly on the kinds of sources typically used in your field. But if you are doing an advanced project such as an MA thesis or PhD dissertation, find an opportunity to search beyond them. If, for example, you were doing a project on the economic effects of agricultural changes on London grain markets in 1600, you might read some Elizabethan plays, look at pictures of working class life, or look for commentary by religious figures on social behavior. Conversely, if you were working on visual representations of daily life in London, you might work up the economic history of the period and place. You can't do this in the limited time you have for short papers, but when you have months to work on a major project, try to look beyond the standard kinds of references relevant to your question. When you do, you enrich not only your specific analysis but your range of intellectual reference and your ability to synthesize diverse kinds of data, a crucial competence of an inquiring mind. For engaging sources, 4.1 Read generously to understand, then critically to engage and evaluate. 4.1.1 Look for creative agreement. 4.1.2 Look for creative disagreement. 4.2 Take notes systematically. 4.2.1 Create templates for notes. 4.2.2 Know when to summarize, paraphrase, or quote. 4.2.3 Guard against inadvertent plagiarism. 4.3 Take useful notes. 4.3.1 Use note-taking to advance your thinking. 4.3.2 Take notes relevant to your question and working hypothesis. 4.3.3 Record relevant context. 4.3.4 Categorize your notes for sorting. 4.4 Write as you read. 4.5 Review your progress. 4.5.1 Search your notes for an answer. 4.5.2 Invent the question. 4.5.3 Resort your notes. 4.6 Manage moments of normal panic. Once you find a source worth a close look, don't read it mechanically, just mining it for data to record. Note-taking is not clerical work. When you take notes on a source thoughtfully, you engage not just its words and ideas but also its implications, consequences, shortcomings, and new possibilities. Engage your source as if its writer were sitting with you, eager for a conversation. 4.1 Read generously to understand, then critically to engage and evaluate. Take the time to read your most promising sources at least twice, first quickly and generously to understand them on their own terms. If you disagree too soon, you can misunderstand or exaggerate a weakness, then reread them slowly and critically, as if you were amiably but pointedly questioning a friend. Imagine his or her answers, then question them. If you disagree, don't just reject a source, read it in ways that will encourage your own original thinking. You probably won't be able to engage your sources fully until after you've done some reading and developed a few ideas of your own. But from the outset, be alert for ways to read your sources not passively, as a consumer, but actively and creatively, as an engaged partner. At some point, better earlier than later, you must look for ways to go beyond your sources, even when you agree with them. 4.1.1 Look for creative agreement. It is a happy moment when a source confirms your views. But if you just passively agree, you won't develop any of your own ideas. So, while generously acknowledging the scope of your source's argument, try to extend what your source claims. What new cases might it cover? What new insights can it provide? Is there confirming evidence your source hasn't considered? Here are some ways to agree creatively. 4.1.1.1 Offer additional support. You have new evidence to support a source's claim. Smith uses anecdotal evidence to show that the Alamo story had mythic status beyond Texas, but a study of big city newspapers offers better evidence. 1. Source supports a claim with old evidence, but maybe you can offer new evidence. 2. Source supports a claim with weak evidence, but maybe you can offer stronger evidence. 4.1.1.2 Confirm unsupported claims. You can prove something that a source has only assumed or speculated. Smith recommends visualization to improve sports performance, but a study of the mental activities of athletes shows why that is good advice. 1. Source only speculates that X might be true, but maybe you can offer evidence to show that it definitely is. 2. Source assumes that X is true, but maybe you can prove it. 4.1.1.3 Apply, claim more widely. You can extend a position to new areas. Smith has shown that medical students learn physiological processes better when they are explained with many metaphors rather than by just one. The same appears to be true for engineers learning physical processes. 1. Source correctly applies his claim to one situation, but maybe it can apply to new ones. 2. Source claims that X is true in a specific situation, but maybe it's true in general. 4.1.2 Look for creative disagreement. It is even more important to note when you disagree with a source, because that might suggest a working hypothesis for your whole report. So instead of just noting that you disagree with another writer's views, use that disagreement to encourage your own productive thinking. Here are some kinds of disagreement. 4.1.2.1 Contradictions of kind. A source says something is one kind of thing, but maybe it's another kind. Smith says that certain religious groups are considered cults because of their strange beliefs, but those beliefs are no different in kind from standard religions. 1. Source claims that X is a kind of Y, but maybe it's not. 2. Source claims that X always has Y as one of its features or qualities, but maybe it doesn't. 3. Source claims that X is normal, good, significant, useful, moral, interesting, but maybe it's not. 4.1.2.2 Part-whole contradictions. You can show that a source mistakes how the parts of something are related. Smith has argued that sports are crucial to an educated person, but in fact athletics have no place in college. 1. Source claims that X is a part of Y, but maybe it's not. 2. Source claims that part of X relates to another of its parts in a certain way, but maybe it doesn't. 3. Source claims that every X has Y as one of its parts, but maybe it doesn't. 4.1.2.3 Developmental of historical contradictions. You can show that a source mistakes the origin and development of a topic. Smith argues that the world population will continue to rise, but it will not. 1. Source claims that X is changing, but maybe it's not. 2. Source claims that X originated in Y, but maybe it didn't. 3. Source claims that X develops in a certain way, but maybe it doesn't. 4.1.2.4 External cause-effect contradictions. You can show that a source mistakes, say, causal relationship. Smith claims that juveniles can be stopped from becoming criminals by boot camps. But evidence shows that it makes them more likely to become criminals. 1. Source claims that X causes Y, but maybe it doesn't. 2. Source claims that X causes Y, but maybe they are both caused by Z. 3. Source claims that X is sufficient to cause Y, but maybe it's not. 4. Source claims that X causes only Y, but maybe it also causes Z. 4.1.2.5 Contradictions of perspective. Most contradictions don't change a conceptual framework, but when you can contradict a standard view of things, you urge others to think in a new way. Smith assumes that advertising is a purely economic function, but it also serves as a laboratory for new art forms. 1. Source discusses X in the context of or from the point of view of Y, but maybe a new context or point of view reveals a new truth. 2. Source analyzes X using theory value system Y, but maybe you can analyze X from a new point of view and see it in a new way. As we said, you probably won't be able to engage sources in these ways until after you've read enough to form some views of your own. But if you keep these ways of thinking in mind as you begin to read, you'll engage your sources sooner and more productively. Of course, once you discover that you can productively agree or disagree with a source, you should ask, so what? So what if you can show that while Smith claims that Easterners did not embrace the story of the Alamo enthusiastically, in fact many did. 4.2 Take notes systematically. Like the other steps in a research project, note-taking goes better with a plan. 4.2.1 Create templates for notes. You will take notes more reliably if you set up a system that encourages you to think beyond the mere content of your sources by analyzing and organizing that content into useful categories. A few instructors still recommend taking notes in longhand on 3x5 cards, as in Figure 4.1. A card like that may seem old-fashioned, but it provides a template for efficient note-taking, even if you take notes on a laptop. Here is a plan for such a template. At the top of each new page, create a space for bibliographic data. Create another space at the top for keywords. Those words will later let you sort and resort your notes by subject matter. Create different places on each new page for different kinds of notes. You might even label the places. In particular, create a section specifically dedicated to your own responses, agreements, disagreements, speculations, and so on. That will encourage you to do more than simply record the content of what you read. When you quote the words of a source, record them in a distinctive color or font size and style so that you can recognize quotations at a glance, and enclose them in large quotation marks in case the file loses its formatting. When you paraphrase a passage, record the paraphrase in a distinctive color or font so that you can't possibly mistake it for your own ideas, and enclose it in curly brackets. If you can't take notes directly on a computer, make paper copies of the template. Figure 4.1. Example of a note card. 4.2.2 Know when to summarize, paraphrase, or quote. It would take you forever to transcribe the exact words of every source you might want to use, so you must know when not to quote but to summarize or paraphrase. Summarize when you need only the general point of a passage, section, or even whole article or book. Summary is useful for general context or related but not specifically relevant data or views. A summary of a source never serves as good evidence. Paraphrase when you can represent what a source says more clearly or pointedly than it does. Paraphrase doesn't mean just changing a word or two. You must use your own words and your own phrasing to replace most of the words and phrasing of the passage. A direct quotation always serves as better evidence than a paraphrase does. Record exact quotations when they serve these purposes. The quoted words constitute evidence that backs up your reasons. If, for example, you wanted to claim that people in different regions responded to the Battle of the Alamo differently, you would quote exact words from different newspapers. You would paraphrase them if you needed only their general sentiments. The words are from an authority who backs up your view. They are strikingly original. They express your ideas so compellingly that the quotation can frame the rest of your discussion. They state a view that you disagree with, and to be fair, you want to state that view exactly. If you don't record important words now, you can't quote them later, so copy or photocopy more passages than you think you'll need. Never abbreviate a quotation thinking you can accurately reconstruct it later. You can't. If you misquote, you fatally undermine your credibility, so double-check your quote against the original. Then check it again. 4.2.3 Guard against inadvertent plagiarism. Sloppy note-taking has caused grief for students and professionals alike, ranging from ridicule for trivial errors to professional exile for inadvertent plagiarism. To avoid that risk, commit to heart these 2 iron rules for recording information in notes. Always unambiguously identify words and ideas from a source so that weeks or months later you cannot possibly mistake them for your own. As recommended above, record quotations and paraphrases with quotation marks, as well as in a font that unambiguously distinguishes them from your own ideas. Never paraphrase a source so closely that a reader can match the phrasing and sense of your words with those in your source. In fact, rather than retyping quotations of more than a few lines, download or photocopy them. Add to the top of the downloaded or photocopied page the name of the source and keywords for sorting. This is important. Never assume that you can use what you find online without citing its source, even if it's free and publicly available. Nothing releases you from the duty to acknowledge your use of anything you did not personally create yourself. 4.3 Take useful notes. Readers will judge your report not just by the quality of your sources and how accurately you report them but also by how deeply you engage them. To do that, you must take notes in a way that not only reflects but encourages a growing understanding of your project. 4.3.1 Use note-taking to advance your thinking. Many inexperienced researchers think that note-taking is a matter of merely recording data. Once they find a source, they download or photocopy pages or write down exactly what's on them. Recording and photocopying can help you quote or paraphrase accurately, but if that's all you do, if you don't engage your sources actively, you will simply accumulate a lot of inert data that are likely to be equally inert in your report. If you photocopy lots of text, annotate it in a way that engages your critical thinking. Start by picking out those sentences that express crucial elements in a chapter or article. Highlight or label them in the margin. Then mark ideas or data that you expect to include in your report. Then on the back of the photocopied pages, summarize what you've highlighted or sketch a response to it, or make notes in the margin that help you interpret the highlighting. The more you write about a source now, the better you will understand and remember it later. 4.3.2 Take notes relevant to your question and working hypothesis to make your notes most useful. Record not just the facts that you think you can use as evidence but also data that help you explain those facts and their relationship to your claim. You can create a notes template to help you remember to look for several different kinds of information. The first 3 items are directly relevant to your working hypothesis. Reasons that support your hypothesis or suggest a new one. Evidence that supports your reasons. Views that undermine or even contradict your hypothesis. Do not limit your notes to supporting data. You will need to respond to data that qualify or even contradict your hypothesis when you make your case in support of it. These next items might not support or challenge your hypothesis, but they may help you explain its context or simply make your report more readable. Historical background of your question and what authorities have said about it, particularly earlier research. Historical or contemporary context that explains the importance of your question. Important definitions and principles of analysis. Analogies, comparisons, and anecdotes that might not directly support your hypothesis but do explain or illustrate complicated issues or simply make your analysis more interesting. Strikingly original language relevant to your topic. 4.3.3 Record relevant context. Those who misreport sources deliberately are dishonest, but an honest researcher can mislead inadvertently if she merely records words and ignores their role or qualifications. To guard against misleading your reader, follow these guidelines. 1. Do not assume that a source agrees with a writer when the source summarizes that writer's line of reasoning. Quote only what a source believes, not its account of someone else's beliefs, unless that account is relevant. 2. Record why sources agree, because why they agree can be as important as why they don't. 2 Psychologists might agree that teenage drinking is caused by social influences, but one might cite family background, the other peer pressure. 3. Record the context of a quotation. When you note an important conclusion, record the author's line of reasoning. Not Bartley, the war was caused by Z, but Bartley, the war was caused by Y and Z, but the most important was Z, for 2 reasons. First, second, even if you care only about a conclusion, you'll use it more accurately if you record how a writer reached it. 4. Record the scope and confidence of each statement. Do not make a source seem more certain or expansive than it is. The second sentence below doesn't report the first fairly or accurately. One study on the perception of risk suggests a correlation between high-stakes gambling and single-parent families. Wilson says single-parent families cause high-stakes gambling. 5. Record how a source uses a statement. Note whether it's an important claim, a minor point, a qualification or concession, and so on. Such distinctions help you avoid mistakes like this. Original by Jones, we cannot conclude that one event causes another because the second follows the first. Nor can statistical correlation prove causation. But no one who has studied the data doubts that smoking is a causal factor in lung cancer. Misleading report. Jones claims we cannot conclude that one event causes another because the second follows the first. Nor can statistical correlation prove causation. Therefore, statistical evidence is not a reliable indicator that smoking causes lung cancer. 4.3.4 Categorize your notes for sorting. Finally, a conceptually demanding task. As you take notes, categorize the content of each one under 2 or more different keywords. Avoid mechanically using words only from the note, Categorize the note by what it implies, by a general idea larger than the specific content of the note. If you've used online search engines in your hunt for sources, you will already have followed some keyword trails. Record these keyword tags exactly as they appear in the search results. Keep a list of the keywords you use, and use the same ones for related notes. Do not create a new keyword for every new note. This step is crucial because it forces you to distill the content of a note down to a word or two, and if you take notes on a computer, those keywords will let you instantly group related notes with a single find command. If you use more than one keyword, you can recombine your notes in different ways to discover new relationships. 4.4 Write as you read. We've said this before, writing forces you to think hard. So don't wait to nail down an idea in your mind before you write it out on the page. Experienced researchers know that the more they write, the sooner and better they understand their project. There is good evidence that the most successful researchers set a fixed time to write every day, from 15 minutes to more than an hour. They might only draft a paragraph that responds to a source, summarizes a line of reasoning, or speculates about a new claim. But they write something, not to start a first draft of their report but to sort out their ideas and maybe discover new ones. If you miss your goals, post a schedule by your computer. If you write something that seems promising, add it to your storyboard. You will almost certainly revise it for your final draft, maybe even omit it entirely. But even if you reuse little of it, the more you write now, no matter how sketchily, the more easily you'll draft later. Preparatory writing and drafting aren't wholly different, but it's a good idea to think of them as distinct steps. If you're new to a topic, much of this early writing may be just summary and paraphrase. When you reread it, you might see few of your own ideas and feel discouraged at your lack of original thinking. Don't be. Summarizing and paraphrasing are how we all gain control over new data, new and complicated ideas, even new ways of thinking. Writing out what we are trying to understand is a typical, probably even necessary, stage in just about everyone's learning curve. 4.5 Review your progress. Regularly review your notes and storyboard to see where you are and where you have to go. Full pages indicate reasons with support, empty pages indicate work to do. Consider whether your working hypothesis is still plausible. Do you have good reasons supporting it? Good evidence to support those reasons? Can you add new reasons or evidence? 4.5.1 Search your notes for an answer. We have urged you to find a working hypothesis or at least a question to guide your research. But some writers start with a question so vague that it evaporates as they pursue it. If that happens to you, search your notes for a generalization that might be a candidate for a working hypothesis, then work backward to find the question it answers. Look first for questions, disagreements, or puzzles in your sources and in your reaction to them. What surprises you might surprise others. Try to state that surprise. I expected the first mythic stories of the Alamo to originate in Texas, but they didn't. They originated in. That tentative hypothesis suggests that the Alamo myth began as a national, not a regional, phenomenon, a modest but promising start. If you can't find a hypothesis in your notes, look for a pattern of ideas that might lead you to one. If you gathered data with a vague question, you probably sorted them under predictable keywords. For masks, the categories might be their origins, uses, materials, and so on. For example, Egyptians, mummy masks of gold for nobility, wood for others; Aztecs, masks from gold and jade buried only in the graves of the nobility; New Guinea tribes, masks for the dead from feathers from rare birds. Those facts could support a general statement such as mask-making cultures use the most valuable materials available to create religious masks, especially for the dead. Once you can generate 2 or 3 such statements, try to formulate a still larger generalization that might include them all. Many cultures invest great material and human resources in creating masks that represent their deepest values. Generalization: Egyptians, Aztecs, and Oceanic cultures all created religious masks out of the rarest and most valuable materials. Although in Oceanic cultures most males participate in mask making, both the Egyptians and Aztecs set aside some of their most talented artists and craftsmen for mask making. If you think that some readers might plausibly disagree with that generalization, you might be able to offer it as a claim that corrects their misunderstanding. 4.5.2 Invent the question. Now comes a tricky part. It's like reverse engineering. You've found the answer to a question that you haven't yet asked, so you have to reason backward to invent the question that your new generalization answers. In this case, it might be what signs indicate the significance of masks in the societies of those who make and use them? As paradoxical as it may seem, experienced researchers often discover their question after they answer it, the problem they should have posed after they solve it. 4.5.3 Resort your notes. If none of that helps, try resorting your notes. When you first selected keywords for your notes, you identified general concepts that could organize not just your evidence but your thinking. If you chose keywords representing those concepts carefully, you can resort your notes in different ways to get a new slant on your material. If your keywords no longer seem relevant, review your notes to create new ones and reshuffle again. 4.6 Manage moments of normal panic. This may be the time to address a problem that afflicts even experienced researchers and at some point will probably afflict you. As you shuffle through hundreds of notes and a dozen lines of thought, you start feeling that you're not just spinning your wheels but spiraling down into a black hole of confusion, paralyzed by what seems to be an increasingly complex and ultimately unmanageable task. The bad news is that there's no sure way to avoid such moments. The good news is that most of us have them and they usually pass. Yours will too if you keep moving along, following your plan, taking on small and manageable tasks instead of trying to confront the complexity of the whole project. It's another reason to start early, to break a big project into its smallest steps, and to set achievable deadlines, such as a daily page quota when you draft. Many writers try to learn from their research experience by keeping a journal, a diary of what they did and found, the lines of thought they pursued, why they followed some and gave up on others. Writing is a good way to think more clearly about your reading, but it's also a good way to think more clearly about your thinking. 5. Planning your argument. 5.1 What a research argument is and is not. 5.2 Build your argument around answers to readers' questions. 5.3 Turn your working hypothesis into a claim. 5.4 Assemble the elements of your argument. 5.4.1 State and evaluate your claim. 5.4.2 Support your claim with reasons and evidence. 5.4.3 Acknowledge and respond to readers' points of view. 5.4.4 Establish the relevance of your reasons. 5.5 Distinguish arguments based on evidence from arguments based on warrants. 5.6 Assemble an argument. Most of us would rather read than write. There is always another article to read, one more source to track down, just a bit more data to gather. But well before you've done all the research you'd like to do, there comes a point when you must start thinking about the first draft of your report. You might be ready when your storyboard starts to fill up and you're satisfied with how it looks. You will know you're ready when you think you can sketch a reasonable case to support your working hypothesis. If your storyboard is full and you still can't pull together a case strong enough to plan a draft, you may have to rethink your hypothesis, perhaps even your question. But you can't be certain where you stand in that process until you try to plan that first draft. If you're not an experienced writer, we suggest planning your first draft in 2 steps. Sort your notes into the elements of a research argument. Organize those elements into a coherent form. In this chapter, we explain how to assemble your argument, in the next, how to organize it. As you gain experience, you'll learn to combine those 2 steps into one. 5.1 What a research argument is and is not. The word argument has bad associations these days, partly because radio and TV stage so many abrasive ones. But the argument in a research report doesn't try to intimidate an opponent into silence or submission. In fact, there's rarely an opponent at all. Like any good argument, a research argument resembles an amiable conversation in which you and your imagined readers reason together to solve a problem whose solution they don't yet fully accept. That doesn't mean they oppose your claims. It means only that they won't accept them until they see good reasons based on reliable evidence and until you respond to their reasonable questions and reservations. In face-to-face conversation, making a cooperative argument is easy. You state your reasons and evidence not as a lecturer would to a silent audience but as you would engage talkative friends sitting around a table with you. You offer a claim and some reasons to believe it. They probe for details, raise objections, or offer their points of view. You respond, perhaps with questions of your own. and they ask more questions. At its best, it's an amiable but thoughtful back and forth that develops and tests the best case that you and they can make together. In writing, that kind of cooperation is harder, because you usually write alone, and so you must not only answer your imagined readers' questions but ask them on their behalf, as often and as sharply as real readers will. But your aim isn't just to think up clever rhetorical strategies that will persuade readers to accept your claim regardless of how good it is. It is to test your claim and especially its support, so that when you submit your report to your readers, you offer them the best case you can make. In a good research report, readers hear traces of that imagined conversation. Now, as we've said, reasoning based on evidence isn't the only way to reach a sound conclusion, sometimes not even the best way. We often make good decisions by relying on intuition, feelings, or spiritual insight, but when we try to explain why we believe our claims are sound and why others should too, we have no way to demonstrate how we reach them, because we can't offer intuitions or feelings as evidence for readers to evaluate. We can only say we had them and ask readers to take our claim on faith, a request that thoughtful readers rarely grant. When you make a research argument, however, you must lay out your reasons and evidence so that your readers can consider them, then you must imagine both their questions and your answers. That sounds harder than it is. 5.2 Build your argument around answers to readers' questions. It is easy to imagine the kind of conversation you must have with your readers, because you have them every day. A. I hear you had a hard time last semester. How do you think this one will go? B. Better, I hope. A. Why so? B. I'm taking courses in my major. A. Like what? B. History of art, Intro to Design. A. Why will taking courses in your major make a difference? B. When I take courses I'm interested in, I work harder. A. What about that math course you have to take? B. I know I had to drop it last time I took it, but I found a good tutor. If you can see yourself as A or B, you will find nothing new in the argument of a research report, because you build one out of the answers to those same 5 questions. What is your claim? What reasons support it? What evidence supports those reasons? How do you respond to objections and alternative views? What principle makes your reasons relevant to your claim? If you ask and answer those 5 questions, you can't be sure that your readers will accept your claim, but you make it more likely that they'll take it, and you, seriously. 5.3 Turn your working hypothesis into a claim. We described the early stages of research as finding a question and imagining a tentative answer. We called that answer your working hypothesis. Now, as we discuss building an argument to support that hypothesis, we change our terminology a last time. When you think you can write a report that backs up your hypothesis with good reasons and evidence, you'll present that hypothesis as your argument's claim. Your claim is the center of your argument, the point of your report. 5.4 Assemble the elements of your argument. At the core of your argument are 3 elements: your claim, your reasons for accepting it, and the evidence that supports those reasons. To that core you'll add 1 and perhaps 2 more elements. One responds to questions, objections, and alternative points of view, the other answers those who do not understand how your reasons are relevant to your claim. 5.4.1 State and evaluate your claim. Start a new first page of your storyboard. At the bottom, state your claim in a sentence or 2. Be as specific as you can, because the words in this claim will help you plan and execute your draft. Avoid vague value words like important, interesting, significant, and the like. Compare the 2 following claims. Masks play a significant role in many religious ceremonies. In cultures from pre-Columbian America to Africa and Asia, masks allow religious celebrants to bring deities to life so that worshippers experience them directly. Now judge the significance of your claim. A significant claim doesn't make a reader think I know that, but rather really? How interesting. What makes you think so? These next 2 claims are too trivial to justify reading, much less writing a report to back them up. This report discusses teaching popular legends such as the Battle of the Alamo to elementary school students. Teaching our national history through popular legends such as the Battle of the Alamo is common in elementary education. Of course, what your readers will count as interesting depends on what they know, and if you're early in your research career, that's something you can't predict. If you're writing one of your first reports, assume that your most important reader is you. It is enough if you alone think your answer is significant. If it makes you think, well, I didn't know that when I started. If, however, you think your own claim is vague or trivial, you're not ready to assemble an argument to support it, because you have no reason to make one. 5.4.2 Support your claim with reasons and evidence. It may seem obvious that you must back up a claim with reasons and evidence, but it's easy to confuse those two words because we often use them as if they meant the same thing. What reasons do you base your claim on? What evidence do you base your claim on? But they mean different things. We think up logical reasons, but we collect hard evidence. We don't collect hard reasons and think up logical evidence. And we base reasons on evidence, we don't base evidence on reasons. A reason is abstract, and you don't have to cite its source. Evidence usually comes from outside your mind, so you must always cite its source, even if you found it through your own observation or experiment, then you must show what you did to find it. Reasons need the support of evidence. Evidence should need no support beyond a reference to a reliable source. The problem is that what you think is a true fact and therefore hard evidence, your readers might not. For example, suppose a researcher offers this claim and reason. Early Alamo stories reflected values already in the American character. Claim the story almost instantly became a legend of American heroic sacrifice. Reason. To support that reason, she offers this hard evidence. Soon after the battle, many newspapers used the story to celebrate our heroic national character. Evidence. If readers accept that statement as a fact, they may accept it as evidence. But skeptical readers, the kind you should expect, are likely to ask how soon is soon? How many is many? Which papers? In news stories or editorials? What exactly did they say? How many papers didn't mention it? To be sure, readers may accept a claim based only on a reason, if that reason seems self-evidently true or is from a trusted authority. We are all created equal, reason, so no one has a natural right to govern us. Claim. In fact, instructors in introductory courses often accept reasons supported only by what authoritative sources say. Wilson says X about religious masks, Yang says Y, Schmidt says Z. But in advanced work, readers expect more. They want evidence drawn not from a secondary source but from primary sources or your own observation. Review your storyboard. Can you support each reason with what your readers will think is evidence of the right kind, quantity, and quality and is appropriate to their field? Might your readers think that what you offer as evidence needs more support? Or a better source? If so, you must find more data or acknowledge the limits of what you have. Your claim, reasons, and evidence make up the core of your argument, but it needs at least one more element, maybe two. 5.4.3 Acknowledge and respond to readers' points of view. You may wish it weren't so, but your best readers will be the most critical. They'll read fairly but not accept everything you write at face value. They will think of questions, raise objections, and imagine alternatives. In conversation you can respond to questions as others ask them. But in writing you must not only answer those questions but ask them. If you don't, you'll seem not to know or, worse, not to care about your readers' views. Readers raise two kinds of questions, try to imagine and respond to both. 1. The first kind of question points to problems inside your argument, usually it's evidence. Imagine a reader making any of these criticisms, then construct a mini argument in response. Your evidence is from an unreliable or out-of-date source, it is inaccurate, it is insufficient, it doesn't fairly represent all the evidence available, it is the wrong kind of evidence for our field, it is irrelevant, because it does not count as evidence. Then imagine these kinds of reservations about your reasons and how you would answer them. Your reasons are inconsistent or contradictory, they are too weak or too few to support your claim, they are irrelevant to your claim. 2. The second kind of question raises problems from outside your argument. Those who see the world differently are likely to define terms differently, reason differently, even offer evidence that you think is irrelevant. If you and your readers see the world differently, you must acknowledge and respond to these issues as well. Do not treat these differing points of view simply as objections. You will lose readers if you argue that your view is right and theirs is wrong. Instead, acknowledge the differences, then compare them so that readers can understand your argument on its own terms. They still might not agree, but you'll show them that you understand and respect their views. They are then more likely to try to understand and respect yours. If you're a new researcher, you'll find these questions hard to imagine because you might not know how your readers' views differ from your own. Even so, try to think of some plausible questions and objections. It's important to get into the habit of asking yourself what could cast doubt on my claim? But if you're writing a thesis or dissertation, you must know the issues that others in your field are likely to raise. So however experienced you are, practice imagining and responding to significant objections and alternative arguments, even if you just go through the motions.